In the last hour, the Border Security Minister has told this programme she doesn't know how many undocumented migrants there are in the United Kingdom. Angela Eagle said she couldn't predict when numbers of small boat crossings would start to fall. Well, let's stay on the theme of immigration now. A little earlier, I spoke to the Shadow Home Secretary, Chris Philp. Chris Philp, how concerned are you about the Chinese Communist Party's activities in the UK? For example, there are Confucius Institutes, there are people monitoring the views and activities of Chinese students in our universities.
Well, I'm deeply concerned by the activities of the Chinese Communist Party. For many years now, they've been engaging in organised and systemic attempts to influence political life. There was a Labour MP who received money, for example, from a declared Chinese agent. We've seen them infiltrating universities to get hold of cutting-edge technologies that have been developed in our universities. And we've seen straightforward espionage activity as well. So it's something the Chinese state, the Chinese Communist Party, have been doing on a systemic basis for many, many years. It's deeply concerning.
And we've now seen, of course, the allegation that a person who has been denied entry to the UK, Chinese, because of what is alleged to be spying activities, has got close to a member of the royal family. How serious do you think that risk is?
Well, I think everybody in public life and involved in, as I say, business and academia needs to think very, very carefully about people who might be connected to the Chinese state. I think, in fairness to Prince Andrew, as soon as he was warned of the risk, he cut all contact. But what this does illustrate are the risks are there, and everyone needs to be extremely vigilant.
But, of course, it's very difficult for anybody to know, isn't it? I mean, you meet somebody who happens to be Chinese. You can't necessarily decide whether they're a threat or not. Should these people actually have more support, particularly prominent people like members of the royal family?
Well, I think people who are in positions that are sensitive or high profile should be particularly vigilant. And I think if there is any doubt at all, they should contact the security services, who obviously are able to advise on these things. And I think that we should be pursuing a precautionary principle. Anyone in significant positions should be particularly careful and, as I say, take advice if there is any doubt at all.
It is difficult, of course, isn't it? Because seeing this morning photographs of the former Prime Ministers, Lady May and Lord Cameron, with photographs of the particular individual who's been barred. I suppose what I'm really trying to get at here is, how is it possible for prominent people or people who might have influence to protect themselves against allegations of being influenced in some way by the Chinese networks? Because this seemed to be extremely extensive already.
Well, from what I can tell, and looking at the statements that Theresa May and David Cameron have issued, it looks like the person was photographed with them on a sort of almost brush-by basis in an event where, many other people would have been present, and there was no sort of meaningful contact or communication. Now, in public life, you stop and get photographed next to people the whole time. It happens, dozens of times a week, and it doesn't imply any sort of deep relationship. Where I think people in public life or in other sensitive roles, and that includes, as I say, universities, need to be particularly careful is if the relationship becomes deep, anything more than superficial, and the other person starts having influence or gaining knowledge. That is where you've got to be careful. And I think, as I say, take advice quickly if you're at all concerned.
More generally, last year, Kemi Badenoch said China is not a threat, but a challenge. I noticed that in the very same week, you said it was not a challenge, but a threat. Who's right?
Well, I think we're dancing on the head of a pin here.
Well, a challenge and a threat are very different things.
Well, look, I think the point that we were both making, perhaps in slightly different language, but the point we were both making is that, China is expanding its sphere of influence in that particular part of South Asia, but obviously beyond, and we're feeling that in the UK today with this story about the Chinese spy. There is industrial-scale intellectual property theft that has been going on for years, possibly decades, both targeted at businesses and also universities who are developing cutting-edge science. So we need to be very mindful of those challenges. But of course, China is also, on some measures, the world's largest economy, on other measures, the world's second largest economy. So, we do need to be trading with them as well.
All right. Let's talk about your specific area of responsibility. I imagine you must be pretty pleased with the information the government's putting out today on illegal migration, because they seem to be carrying on the trend that you started.
Well, it's welcome that they've continued the work we were doing on removing people with no right to be here, and the trends that were the rising trends under the last government have continued. So they've sort of continued with that inheritance. But what concerns me is that the illegal crossings over the English Channel by small boat have gone up by 18% since the election, compared to the same period last year. That's a significant increase. And the reason those illegal and dangerous small boat crossings have gone up under Labour is they scrapped the Rwanda deterrent before it had even started. The first flight was due to take off on July 24th. Now, the NCA, the National Crime Agency, have told us you need a deterrent to stop the boats. Law enforcement alone is not enough. And that's why it was so foolish for Labour to scrap that Rwanda deterrent before it even started.
I do feel a slight sense of Groundhog Day here. Are you really still saying that a deterrent which never got in place, which never hit the ground, is somehow is actually deterred anybody? The Rwanda scheme never actually happened, so how did it deter anybody?
Well, I mean, look, the point I'm making is that had it started on July the 24th
but it didn't.
as planned, no, but had it started, by now it would have been having an effect, and we would not have been seeing increases in numbers.
But it didn't. But and you guys keep coming. You guys, what I mean is people from the previous government keep coming in and saying that the reason that there are still people coming here is because they didn't do Rwanda. You never got Rwanda to happen. Nobody ever went to Rwanda. Yeah. It never was a deterrent.
Well, so last year, 2023, the numbers went down. Now we see after July the numbers going up. And what I'm saying is, if that Rwanda deterrent had started as planned, the numbers would have gone down. But it's not just me saying that. It's the National Crime Agency saying that you need a deterrent. And where a deterrent has been used elsewhere, it has worked. For example, Australia had a similar approach about 10 years ago as part of their Operation Sovereign Borders, which completely stopped the boats that were crossing from Indonesia to Australia. We've seen the Belgians intercepting boats near the shore. That has cut Belgian departures by 93%. And when we started returning Albanians, that cut Albanian crossings again by about 90%. So we know deterrents work, and it was a huge mistake to cancel this deterrent before it even started.
All right, we could dance on the head of that particular pin forever, but I want to just, before we finish, ask you about reform, because, of course, immigration is reform's big card, and they are leaning both on you and also on the Labour Party. There are reports this week that local branches of Conservatives reform have been discussing unofficial pacts to face Labour in local elections next year. Are you up for that?
No, we're up for fighting every single seat. We've been winning council by-elections up and down the country since the general election. We've been winning far more seats than Reform. I think we've won about 5 or 6 times more seats than Reform. Look, we're the opposition. We've got 121 MPs in Parliament. They've only got 5. We're the ones holding the government to account day in, day out. And, Trevor, as we saw in the general election, if you vote Reform, you get Labour.
So a memo's going to go out to local associations saying you may not talk to Reform about any cooperation or accommodation or any deals locally.
We want to fight everywhere. We've been winning everywhere. If you look at council by-elections...
No, that's not the answer to the...
Well, I'm not...
You're answering your own question. The question I'm asking you is, are there going to be instructions sent out from Conservative headquarters telling local associations there will be no pact, there will be no deals, there will be no arrangements with Reform locally?
Well, I'm not the memo guy, but I do know that we're going to be looking to fight every single seat that we possibly can.
You're not telling me that then... You're deliberately not telling me...
It's not my area of responsibility. Look, by saying... Trevor, I am answering the question.
Turn to camera and talk to local party chairs and tell them what you want them to do and what you do not want them to do.
Fight every single seat and aim to win every single seat.
And no deals with Reform?
Well, that implies no deals because we're fighting everywhere. Doesn't it?
All right. By the way, just one last thing. Reform, polling suggests the only age group where you're leading Reform is in the over 60s. Are the Tories about to become history?
No, I don't think so. Look, I think we're the official opposition. We are the ones in Parliament, day in, day out, holding the government to account, and we are winning council by-elections up and down the country. We're winning them off Labour, we're winning them off all kinds of other parties, and we're doing far better than Reform in these by-elections.
Chris Philp, thank you very much.
Thank you.